Hi, welcome to Talk About the Passion. I'm your host, Christian Campagna, and this is episode 66, No Tolerance for Silence. And today I'm talking to Josh Welshman. Josh is the singer of the death metal band Defeated Sanity. The title of this episode comes from the title of a Circle of Dead Children song. Since Josh talks about the importance of their record Human Harvest on this episode, it made sense. In this episode, we talk about him being a fan of the band Defeated Sanity and eventually becoming their singer. He's been in the band for quite some time now and is finally on their newest record, the Sanguinary Impetus. One of the things this podcast has been good for getting me back into is the art of, listening to music, putting a record on and putting your phone in the other room and, holding the record and just absorbing the music. But the last few years, I basically have been absorbing music by listening to it at work, usually on shuffle and basically in the background. This new Defeated Sanity record, I listened to at work a few times before I had this conversation with Josh. And, I recognized the heaviness and technicality of the music, but wasn't hearing what I heard when I finally sat with it at home a number of times since we spoke here. It's, this 35-minute journey of brutal death metal that just takes you on this cacophonous journey that opens up, at least for me, a little more each time I listen to it. I was never the biggest fan of this style of metal, but, call me a fan now. I've gone down the rabbit hole of them as well as some of the bands Josh talks about on here, like Disgorge and Circle of Dead Children. I love learning about different branches of metal and underground music, so this was a cool conversation to have. You can buy their new record on their Bandcamp page, which is defeatedsanity.bandcamp. They have a bunch of merchandise there right now. I just bought this new record on vinyl like an hour before I started recording this. So I'm excited to hear it on that format and, hold that in my hand and all that fun stuff. Aside from the fact that, you should just generally buy music from bands you like, with these guys, as you'll hear on this episode, they had a tour with Origin and Beneath the Massacre cut short in March of 2020 after just 4 shows because of the pandemic, obviously. The last show was literally March 15th, which, as you know, was, pretty much the day everything stopped. So it feels nice to throw some money at a band who, lost out on a whole tour's worth of merch sales. With that said, let's get this episode going. But first, if you like what you hear here, subscribe, give a rating, tell your friends, all that kind of stuff. I appreciate it. You can follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and I keep those updated. Well then, here we go. Episode 66. This is Josh Welshman, and thank you for listening. All right, well, I am here with Josh Welshman. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. How about yourself, man?
Very good. Well, we're probably about 3,000 miles apart, so I'm technically not here with you. But you grew up back east here, so where did you grow up?
I grew up in Rhode Island, and I spent most of my life there, and then eventually I moved to Connecticut, and I was there for about 4 years for college. And then right after college, I ended up living in New York for about 6 years to kind of start my career as a sound engineer and a producer. And now I live in Washington.
Nice.
All the way across the country. So
nice.
I can't seem to stay still for more than 5 years is the trend.
Yeah, I know. I've gone back and forth between the East and the West a few times in the last few years. So
it's a nice contrast, I'll say.
Yeah, definitely. So growing up in Rhode Island, how young were you when you got into music?
It's hard to say. I mean, I've been into music since I think my memory can even serve me.
Yeah.
But in all different capacities, when I was younger, I want to say some of my first records that I ever got a hold of were Drowning Pool was one of them.
Yep.
And then I eventually moved on to Korn, which Korn was a big band for me when I was a kid.
Right.
Korn and Slipknot, of course. I kind of, as far as the heavy metal tradition of starting with bands like Black Sabbath,
Right.
A lot of the generation before me kind of got their start with Black Sabbath and doing the 80s thing first, and then kind of getting into heavier stuff from there. But when I was younger, the stuff that was in at the time was just that, like, the almost like the hard rock movement of, like, I'm trying to think, like Papa Roach, like the VH1 MTV stuff, you know?
Yeah.
So that's the kind of stuff that I ended up being exposed to, and that kind of showed me and introduced me to the extreme music as far as that goes.
Yeah.
But and kind of the rabbit hole started there.
Right. Yeah, and I think I think I'm probably about 20 years older than you. So my the stuff I grew up on was like same stuff, like the 80s Sabbath and Maiden and that stuff. And
it must have been hard not to be a part of that movement, because, I mean, especially if you were into rock music, it was just such a powerful time for rock and heavy metal music back in the 80s, late 70s.
Yeah, definitely. And it bums me out, too, when guys my age are, like, give younger people shit for, like that, like, Korn, someone would be like, oh, they got the Korn? Well, like, if that was the band when they were young, and it had the same effect as them seeing that band as me seeing Iron Maiden when I was like 15. What's the difference?
Right.
So that kind of attitude always is
totally
silly to me.
Yeah, and I mean and for people like me, like like the 90s kids who were, I mean, for me it was like, that's the kind of stuff that I had kind of gotten introduced to just by means of just the media. Well, not the media, but just that's the kind of stuff I was exposed to.
Yeah,
and then upon listening to that stuff and getting more and more into heavy metal music is when I started to be like, oh, well, like, where did this come from? And then you find out about Black Sabbath, Maiden, Judas Priest, all that kind of great stuff.
Yeah.
So it's cool and it's great to just kind of follow the timeline and see how it's evolved. Because, I mean, nowadays you can write a book on, I mean, there's plenty of books on it, but you could write a friggin' giant manuscript of all the subgenres that have spawned from heavy metal music,
Yeah, it's nuts, right?
It's wild, definitely.
Yeah. And so when you went to college, do you remember the first live shows that you saw as a kid? How young were you?
I'm trying to remember. So it's funny, actually. One of my first concerts, and my girlfriend Kendra and Tanya got a good crack out of this one. One of my first concerts was Cher.
Oh yeah,
which I am not ashamed to admit was badass.
Yeah, actually, that's not a bad. That's actually
Cher's great.
Yeah,
I don't care. I don't care who's listening to this. Cher's great. But as far as rock music goes, Judas Priest.
Yeah,
I saw when I was in, I think, like 4th or 5th grade, I want to say.
Okay.
And that was life changing. That was just wow. Yeah. Crazy show. That's one of the best concerts I've ever been to, I would say.
Yeah. And then sort of like underground stuff. Did you start going into that, like the more extreme stuff, where the like smaller shows?
Yeah. So I mean, I kind of dove down the rabbit hole pretty quickly. I would say, I was in elementary school when I started really diving into extreme music. As far as, again, going back to like Korn and Slipknot and stuff like that, that was like, I was a kid. I was in like 3rd or 4th grade, like, still like going out for recess and stuff like that. Yeah. By 5th or 6th grade, transitioning into middle school, I had already gotten into Cannibal Corpse. I got my first Cannibal Corpse, and that's kind of a pivotal point for me. Was I found Live Cannibalism. It's a live recording from Cannibal Corpse.
Yeah,
I still stand by it. It's one of their best. One of the best things they've ever put out.
Yeah,
but I got that. I was in a record store. It was Strawberries in Warwick.
Yeah.
On Bald Hill Road, and I was just walking around. I was there with my mom, and I was just walking through, and I saw the cover to that album. It was just front of the, like you're just walking through. It's like right there.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is this? And I just sat there and looked at it for like 10 minutes. I was like, what is this? And I got it. Somehow I convinced my mom to get it for me.
She didn't see the song titles. I
don't think she looked at the song titles, but I think that might have changed my entire life trajectory if she had. But when I heard that album and I heard and particularly the first thing that stuck out to me was, you guessed it, the vocals.
Yeah.
Being a vocalist myself, so I was completely captivated by what was happening with that, because I had never heard any. I mean, again, there's extreme vocals in a lot of the music I had listened to up to that point, but Cannibal Corpse was something different, that was something I had never heard before.
Yep.
And from that point on, that's where the pit opened up that I just dove right into.
Yeah.
So, and then I kind of moved on from there, and of course found all the best Cannibal Corpse albums. Had to get into that, and then very quickly dove right into the underground stuff. I was like, okay, this is extreme. I need more extreme. I need like the craziest sounding vocal. I want to hear crazier vocals than this.
Yeah.
I just want to see what depths can the human voice reach.
Yeah.
And then from that point, very quickly I moved on to bands like Dying Fetus, Circle of Dead Children, which is a band not many people know of, but
like a grind,
fantastic band.
Like a grind band, I think.
Yeah, they're Pittsburgh, like death, like kind of like brutal death metal grindcore marriage that they had going on. But I found them. I found a used record of theirs at Newberry Comics. I think in Providence somewhere.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, the album was called Human Harvest. And I did a podcast probably like 4 or 5 months ago. I can't remember with who, but where we basically just talked about that album for like 45 minutes. I could sit and talk about how much of an impact that album had on me for hours. And I still, to this day, I'll just put it on, listen to the whole thing, and just be like, God damn. That is one of the best that's one of the most extreme things I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So what are some of your other like life-changing records? The Cannibal Corpse live record.
That one definitely, Live Cannibalism. That was that was like kind of the pivotal point for me that kind of steered me right into the death metal realm. And then Tomb of the Mutilated by Cannibal Corpse. That's still probably my favorite death metal album. Yeah, I would probably say, because I'll go months like listening to a whole bunch of different stuff, and then I'll put Tomb of the Mutilated back on. And
that's like
I like a lot of other stuff I listen to, I just kind of forget about. I'm like, this does it,
Yeah, nice.
They did it first, and they set the bar so high,
Yeah.
Butchered at Birth, also very close behind Tomb of the Mutilated.
Yeah.
Very common debate I have with my bandmates and people on the road is, what's the best Cannibal Corpse album? Yeah. And most people say Butchered at Birth, and I'm like, nah, Tomb of the Mutilated.
Yeah, I think Tomb of the Mutilated is my favorite. Are you a fan of?
I think it's grimier. It's I don't know. There's something about the songwriting on it that's just grimier, and it's just so. I mean, Butchered at Birth is provocative. Don't get me wrong, but Tomb of the Mutilated, I think, kicked it up just even a half of a notch. But even that, for back in the day, for what that was, was time enough to just send people like totally like batshit crazy over it,
Yeah.
And then so Tomb of the Mutilated, definitely up there. And then I'm almost ashamed to admit it being in the brutal death metal scene, but it took me a long time to actually get into Disgorge, which Disgorge are probably the pinnacle of the brutal death metal scene and the California death metal movement. Mm-hmm. But I had bought my first Disgorge albums. I bought Cranial Impalement and She Lay Gutted. Mm-hmm. I want to say I was probably in middle school then too, and I had gotten those and I liked them. Yeah. But I wasn't like super crazy about them at the time. The vocals, of course. Because Matty Way is one of the best vocalists of all time as far as death metal goes. But I don't know. I guess it was just at a point in my life musically where it didn't I guess it didn't click with me the same way it does now. Right. But I still liked it. I'm not going to say like, I bought it and I hated it and put it on the shelf for 10 years and then picked it up and had this like revelation. But the revelation came for me with Disgorge, with Consume the Forsaken. Yeah. and that is, again, top three, very close behind Tomb of the Mutilated, because that is where Tomb of the Mutilated to me is just grimy, like disgusting, like just gross death metal at its finest. Disgorge, Consume the Forsaken is like pissed off, aggressive death metal. It's just different than Cannibal Corpse ever did it. You know,
Yeah.
It's faster. It's meaner.
Yeah.
It just sounds so pissed off. You just want to hit something when you listen to that album.
I'll have to. I'm not that familiar with them, so I'll have to.
Oh, that's a great one. That's one of those albums definitely changed my life, and also AJ's vocals on that album were a very big inspiration to me as well, because up to that point it was more so about like, oh, who can do like the deepest gutturals and like just go the lowest and stuff. And while his vocals on that album are deep and they are guttural in their own way, they're more so just mean and aggressive and just pissed off sounding. And it was just different than anybody else that I had heard. So
nice.
I even like kind of used the way that he approached vocals alongside some of my other influences to kind of try to form how I wanted to portray my own voice, you know?
Oh, nice.
So yeah, I try to employ a hybrid technique to, I guess,
just bringing in lots
of hit all of the marks that I want to hear as a listener. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, death metal is my favorite kind of music.
Right.
At the end of the day, so I'm always thinking of it as a listener when I'm also creating.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Exactly. So as far as creating it, when did you start? Do you play instruments as well as singing?
Yeah, so it's funny. I mean, for a short introduction to how I got into Defeated Sanity, again, another album, a pivotal album for me was Chapters of Repugnance by Defeated Sanity.
Yeah.
I was a huge Defeated Sanity fan before I joined the band for years.
Oh, nice.
And when that album came out, it blew me away. Just the technicality, but also the aggressiveness, and also had AJ from Consume the Forsaken on vocals on Chapters of Repugnance too. So
nice.
Just absolutely powerhouse of an album, and I was hooked at that point.
Yeah.
So at that time, around when that album came out, also to answer your other question, I do play instruments. I play a bit of piano. I play guitar.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't played much of them, self-admittedly, as much as I would like to.
Right.
But so around that time, it was around when I was in bands in high school and stuff. Mm-hmm. I did vocals in a band called Death Haven, but it was more like deathcore stuff.
Yeah.
Because that was the thing back in the day, and I was also really into that stuff at the time. And I still say that a lot of the albums coming out around then, like the first Whitechapel, is fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah.
The earlier Despised Icon stuff, mm-hmm. Beneath the Massacre, all that kind of stuff. I love a lot of that stuff, honestly. It's a lot of the newer, I hate to be that guy who just says the newer stuff's not as good, but I don't know. It's to me, a lot of the deathcore stuff's just been said and done so well in the past that, like, I don't know. Nobody has really done it for me since then.
Yeah,
but
not much.
So I was in bands like that, playing that sort of stuff in high school and middle school. I started doing vocals when I was in, I want to say like 6th grade, elementary school, going into middle school.
Yeah.
So it's been a long time coming, like forming my voice and trying to get it to go deeper and, you know, coming up with different techniques and stuff like that. And also just trying to come up with vocal styles to fit into different, you know, subgenres of death metal.
Right.
So yeah, at that point, so up through high school, I was doing bands like that. And then, I kind of dove deeper into the brutal death metal stuff, which another album that I heard that steered me into the brutal death metal realm was, Putrid Pile, The Pleasure and Suffering.
Okay.
Because that was the point where I realized, I was like, oh man, there's like a whole like plethora of this stuff. And then I realized that there was a whole brutal death metal scene of bands that like did this kind of thing. Yeah. And I was like, oh man, this is like literally, this music was made for me, kind of a thing, you know?
That's awesome.
So at that point, I played guitar for a bit, and so I just started like writing stuff, and I basically came up with my own little solo project where I used a drum machine, played guitar, did vocals, much like Future Pile. Future Pile is a one-man band.
Right.
And that was like my inspiration to do that at the time, because I was like, oh man, like there's like just one dude like doing everything and putting out this friggin' amazing album. I have to do that. So I started a project that was called Autonomy.
Okay.
And I never put out a full record with that project, but I put out an EP that was 5 songs through Savard Records. Mm-hmm. Guy's name's Barrett. He's up in Rochester. He's one of the bigger labels in the underground death metal scene.
Okay.
But so that whole process exposed me to a lot of people at the time. I started meeting people in the scene and kind of, swapping records. Like, oh, here I just put this out through Savard Records, and people would like trade me, and send me their record, and I'd send them mine. And I just got to meet a lot of people that way and kind of get into the scene at that point. And then I would say at which point I went off to college in 2010. So this was basically around that time.
Yeah.
And then probably like 2011, I kind of like fizzled out because I really started focusing on my schoolwork and stuff like that.
Right.
So fast forward to 2014. Mm-hmm. It was when I had gotten the call, which I had actually talked to Lily from Defeated had hit me up like, I don't know, I want to say maybe like sometime in like 2013, something like that. Because he had heard my music and he was a fan and he liked my voice.
Oh, nice.
So at that point, and I had also put a cover video up on YouTube.
Yeah.
Of a Defeated Sanity song, Consumed by Repugnance, from Chapters of Repugnance. So I had that up on YouTube for, I think, a couple of months, and he had hit me up because he was impressed with it, actually. He was impressed with that I was able to keep up with the complexities of the music, because, of course, a lot of vocalists aren't quite that musically inclined to be able to follow such intricate music.
Right.
At least to follow it along in such a way that the vocal contributes rhythmically to the music, as opposed to just kind of like gurgling on top of it, like you kind of hear in a lot of gore grind stuff. Mm-hmm. But so he was impressed, and he sent me like a rough instrumental bounce of another song, Blissfully Exsanguinated, off of Chapters of Repugnance, and he wanted to hear me do that song because he felt that song had some of the more complicated rhythms, vocally speaking.
Nice.
So he wanted to see if I could pull that one off. So I did a cover and sent it to him, and he was like, "Oh man, this is awesome." He's like, "If I ever need a fill-in, I'll hit you up." And I was like, "Yeah, right." So, and this was probably like 2012, 2013 at the time.
Right.
Maybe even earlier. I can't even remember at this point. But so then fast forward, it's 2014, sometime in the late summer, fall, around then. And he hit me up. I was living in New York at the time. I had started working at a studio in Manhattan. And Lily hits me up out of the blue. He's like, "Hey, so we have a U.S. tour planned, and our current singer, Connie, he's leaving the band, and he can't do this tour. So would you want to step in and do this tour with us?" And I was like, "Hell yeah." So I just basically dropped everything at that point and was like, "Yeah, I'm going to go on tour with this band that I've been a fan of for years, Right. I was like, this is just crazy. And I at first I didn't really expect anything to come of it. Really, right. I thought I was just going to do the tour and potentially like they'd find somebody else that like would do the job and carry the band on at that point.
Right.
But so while I was I had probably like 4 or 5 months to prepare the set, learn all the songs. And then we set out, I think it was in the, I can't remember what month it was. I think it was June, maybe July, actually, of 2015 was the first tour I did with them. It was a mainly Western U.S. tour.
Yeah.
So we did, I think, like the Midwest and the West Coast.
Nice.
And it was like, I want to say it was like 3 weeks. And it just became clear after like the first like week of shows that the fans were like really digging like what I was bringing to the table, and just like the feedback I was getting from people after the shows was really overwhelming.
Yeah. Nice.
Same from the guys from the band, and they were always welcoming right at the start. But after the first set of shows, like Lily was really impressed, and I just got along with everybody really well. And so once that tour came to an end, we all left on good terms, and we were like, yeah, we'll keep in touch and stuff like that. And then I got the second call to go to, I think the next gig I had with them was in Switzerland, actually.
Oh, wow.
It was a festival. It was a small little festival that was being put on in a town called Zug.
Okay.
And I can't remember who was on it at the time. I know there was a band called Cerebral Effusion on it.
Yeah.
And I can't remember who else. But that was my first international travel ever.
Nice.
So I had flown to Berlin to rehearse with the guys because they were all Berlin-based at the time, or Germany-based at the time, at least. And so, yeah, we met up in Berlin. We rehearsed for a few days and went to the show in Switzerland, played. It was awesome.
Nice.
From that point on, I just kind of became the regular.
Yeah.
And then, fast forward, I think it was probably like a year and a half later, maybe 2 years, actually, until I was an official member of the band. I had just been a fill-in up to that point.
Yeah.
It all escalated so quickly, I almost didn't even know what happened. I still don't know what happened.
That's crazy. So before that first tour, when you said preparing, so you're obviously learning the lyrics and singing by yourself, or are you doing any kind of remote rehearsing or anything like that? I guess that's not really.
Not so much. So the way that I had prepared for that tour was I had we had the set list already figured out, the show order, the show order, and all that kind of stuff. So I just made a playlist, and I just went through it pretty much every day. And eventually, when it kind of got closer, I would basically send Lily videos of me doing the set with the music playing in the background, and I would have like a mic hooked up so that I could, stand above it.
Yeah.
But and he would let me know if there was anything that he wanted me to tweak as far as tone or timing or anything like that.
Nice.
And then when the time came for the actual tour, we ended up meeting in California a few days before the first show.
Yeah.
We met at this guy. His name's Matt Kilner. Actually, we met at his house. He's in the band Iniquitous Deeds.
Okay.
Another really, really good underground band. And we met at his place, and we had, I think, 2, maybe 3 days there. We rehearsed a good handful of times and, just kind of worked out all the kinks. And that was the first time I actually played with them. So it was pretty surreal.
Yeah. So,
and it's funny because I have a short little video somewhere. I have to find it of us playing, basically the first song of my first time playing with them. And it's just awesome.
Yeah, that has to be
awesome time.
Nice to watch. And so the first time you go out on stage with them, how big of a venue are you playing?
Oh, it was a tiny little shithole.
Yeah. Okay.
It was a little shithole. It was in the first show was in California, like Northern California.
Yeah.
I can't for the life of me. I think it was just in Sacramento, but it might have been out in the suburbs somewhere where it's like a different town name, but it's like basically Sacramento.
Right.
But I'm pretty sure that's where it was, and it was just in this little tiny club. There was no stage. Some of honestly, those are some of my favorite shows a lot of the time.
Yeah.
I love floor shows where you're like right on at level with the crowd.
Yeah.
Those are always my favorites, honestly.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, it was. I think it was a good turnout. Probably maybe 100 people.
Yeah, nice.
120, something like that at that first show, I want to say. And we were headlining too. That was a headlining tour for Defeated. And we were on with, at the time, I think it was us, and it was a Colorado band called Skinned.
Okay.
They've been around for a long time.
Nice.
And who else was on that tour with us? Carnivore de Procipice.
Okay.
They're from Colombia, brutal death metal band, really cool guys, great band too.
Nice.
But yeah, that first show was it was funny. It was just, really kind of like a little shithole place, but it was a great show, first show.
And so what are you feeling right before you go on stage? Nervous?
I was nervous, but I was nervous and I was excited. I wasn't that nervous because I knew I was pretty solid with the set.
Yeah.
I wasn't worried about like really screwing anything up as much as I was just like, stage fright. I hadn't played a show at that point in years.
Right.
Since high school, really. So it'd been at least 5 years since I was on stage at any capacity, really.
Right. And so for someone listening that doesn't really know the style of metal your band plays, how would you describe it? I've seen it described as technical death metal, or
yeah, I think I've always thought Defeated Sanity was kind of beyond defining within the bounds of one genre, really. But I mean, it's brutal death metal, just death metal at its core.
Yeah, at the core.
I'm honestly like one of those who hates like the sub upon subgenres.
Yeah.
Like people ask me, I'm in a death metal band,
right?
Unless it's somebody who listens to death metal who can relay what I mean when I say brutal death metal.
Yeah, sometimes
all death metal is brutal.
Yeah, sometimes you have to drill down.
It's an innate characteristic of the music, but brutal death metal just takes it that step further. And Defeated's definitely in that school.
Yeah.
But definitely, as far as the technical aspects of it and the progressive aspects of it, Defeated definitely kind of stretches the borders of brutal death metal to reach beyond into, technical death metal. And, even with some of the stuff that Lily's written, he kind of stretches almost into like the old school, like Death and Cynic sort of stuff.
Yep.
The really kind of obscure death metal.
Yeah. I got to see Cynic a few years ago.
Oh, nice. That must have been great.
Yeah, they were great.
Defeated at its core is a brutal death metal band, but you never know what we're gonna come up with next.
yeah. And that scene, like you were saying, where when you first started getting into it, almost sounds similar to when you hear about how thrash metal became popular with kids. They just all sort of traded music, and it was sort of like a network of people. And there's
oh yeah, it's a beautiful thing when records become currency.
Yeah.
Like just records themselves, when it's not money involved, people just trade albums.
Yeah, they just want the
There's
music.
something beautiful about that. That's kind of like a dying art. As far as, I wouldn't say it's a dying art, because who knows what the kids are doing these days.
Right.
But, we've all grown and have bills to pay, so we can't, continue to live in that form of an economy, if you will.
Yeah. But I think people like us that are really into music, want to make sure that like the art form of like a full record and that kind of thing, and the whole package.
Oh yeah. I'm definitely I'm still for that. Like, I like to own things. Like, as far as music goes, like, it's not enough to just listen to it like from some other dimension, just coming from a streaming source. I like to be able to follow lyrics. I like to be able to look, who produced this? Just being me as a geek. But we're all geeks. If we're anybody into music is a geek. I don't care who you are. You're somewhat of a geek, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
Be a geek.
Yeah, I've been using I'll use the streaming for new releases, and then I'll kind of see what I like, and then I'll go buy stuff. And this year has been actually good for a lot of like the classic bands, like Incantation put out a really good record, and
oh yeah, they did.
Napalm Death.
Yeah, it's a great record.
Benediction, Testament.
I'm yet to hear the new Napalm Death. Actually, I feel like I'm falling behind.
Yeah,
I've heard really good things actually.
Yeah. And then there's some bands I discovered, because I've been getting more into sort of the underground, I guess it would be more almost like traditional death metal. But there's been a few cool records that I've found this year that I've gone out and
Did you hear that? Are you into that Blood Incantation?
Yeah.
You know those guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, great band. Great
cool
dudes,
record.
too.
Yeah. What was the other one I got? Ulthar.
Ulthar?
Ulthar. Ulthar.
I'm not familiar.
Yeah.
Make me think of Ulver, the black metal band.
Ulver, yeah. Necrot, I liked. I thought that
I've heard of Necrot. Yeah. I'm not familiar with their music so much, though.
Yeah, I bought their record.
I don't think.
So, yeah.
truth be told, I'm a little behind, actually. I tend to go into these phases of I just listen to my favorites for like months on end.
Yeah.
I'm not in discovery mode. I feel like discovery mode comes for me in the spring.
Yeah, a lot of times too.
When all new life is blooming.
Yeah, or like 5 years later after my friends tell me about something, I'm like, yeah, I finally got around to listening to that record. It is good.
I'll always listen to new albums from bands that I anticipate.
Yeah.
Like the new Incantation I knew was coming out, so of course I'm waiting for it.
Yeah.
And wasn't disappointed.
Yeah, that was great.
And stuff like that, like Blood Incantation, same thing. When their new album came out, I was ready for it.
Yeah. That's a good album to just get high and fucking, it's just out there.
Oh yeah, definitely.
That's good stuff. So you put out this new record is the first record that you appear on with them.
Mm-hmm. Unless you count the re-release of Chapters where there was a couple of bonus tracks that I did, but I don't even count that.
Yeah, okay. And so when was this record recorded?
This new one. So it was kind of a hybrid approach with this one because it was done in multiple stages at different places. So I want to say it was last summer, so summer of 2019. They started recording. Jacob and Lily were in L.A. with Mike Heller from Malignancy. He has a small studio.
Okay.
And they did the drums and bass there together. They were there for, I think, like a week and a half where they did the whole thing. So they did the whole album, drums and bass. And then Lily went back to Berlin. Lily played guitars on this album because Christian unfortunately left before we started tracking. So Lily played guitars on this album. So he went back to Berlin and tracked, I think, with a friend of ours named Norbert. Mm-hmm. And I want to say that was sometime late summer, fall. And then from that point on, I think it was just kind of, the album's not heavily edited, but I mean, there was a few comps that needed to be made and stuff like that. And that was all done over a couple of months. And just getting it ready for doing vocals and mixing. Yeah. So we went to Colin Marston's place from Dysrhythmia, Gorguts.
Oh yeah.
And he lives in Queens, so we went up to New York, all three of us.
Yeah.
And we did the vocals and mixed and mastered the album over the course of, I want to say, a week and a half.
Nice.
And I had also done some of the vocals at home, actually. So I just recorded them with an SM7 over a Universal Audio Apollo.
Yeah.
And essentially, I was demoing all the vocals over the course of, essentially from when the guitars were tracked, sometime at the end of the summer. So end of the summer up until basically New Year's of 2020, I had been tracking and demoing all the songs and talking to Lily, working on the lyrics together, working on the vocal patterns together, the sound, the tones, all that kind of stuff. We basically collaborated on.
Okay.
And then a lot of that stuff we actually used. Those are the takes that actually made the album.
Oh, nice.
So I brought my mic with me, and we just basically picked up where I left off.
Right.
There was a few songs where we weren't totally decided on the parts. So so while we were in the studio, we just kind of like spent time trying different things, trying different voices, trying different rhythms, stuff like that.
Nice.
So at that point, it was that was kind of the ideal situation for me, was the way that we went about recording the vocals for this album, because I had done the bulk of the work at home where I was like comfortable and I could take my time to like warm up. And when I felt like my voice was tired, I could stop and it's not like there was, a bunch of people around that were like waiting on me, stuff like that.
Right.
So I got a bulk of the work done that way. And essentially the time we spent at Colin's place, we were just kind of like having fun with it, and figuring out what worked best, and just, like, how can we get, this is all like, everything we have is great stuff.
Yeah.
But how can we make it better?
Right.
And to me, that's the ideal situation to be in when you're like with your bandmates and you're like producing a record, is like, you have all, it's like a puzzle. You got all the pieces there.
Yeah.
And it's just putting it together.
Yeah.
At which point, but yeah, I'm really happy with that album. I think, usually a couple of weeks after I do anything, I hate it. but not with this album, because a lot went into it as far as my my performance goes, and just the energy and the effort that I put into it.
Yeah,
and it's just a long time coming of me, like, because I had been playing with the band live for, I mean, we're in 2020 now, and I did my first show in 2015, so
right.
5 years.
Yeah.
5 years playing live with the band without being on a record. So
That's crazy.
I had spent 5 years, and that's also 5 years of maybe, like, I want to say maybe like 150, 200 shows. Like, we were very active.
Yeah.
We toured a lot, so I played a lot of shows with the band. So I spent a lot of time, like, really owning my voice and, like, figuring out, like, okay, Defeated's had all these vocalists over time, and they have this whole repertoire of music, and vocally it's very different from album to album.
Right.
So I spent a lot of time, like, well, one, when we played live, I would try to, like, okay, when we play stuff from Psalms of the Morbid, I'd, like, kind of morph my voice to sound a bit more like Jens, to kind of, like, you know, like, the fans want to hear those songs, and I try to, like, kind of fit into that pocket of sound, whereas they're a fan of that album, so I'm going to try to make it sound like that album more so than, you know, like, Chapters.
Right.
And vice versa. But over the course of that time, I had, while doing that process, also figuring out how to shape my voice and figuring out what my voice is in this band.
Right.
And kind of being able to experiment with, you know, different kind of sounds and different kinds of vocal techniques to figure out, you know, how I can kind of carry the torch with this band and bring something new that none of the previous vocalists had brought, which I'm a fan of every vocalist in Defeated Sanity.
Yeah.
Like, they're all amazing vocalists in their own ways, and they brought something really different each time.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do that as well, but also be the best representation of myself at the same time, and bring something that I was happy with too.
Yeah. And it's cool that, so with all the hard work you did before recording, you were able to experiment more and find your voice even more, like, while there with you know, real-time input from your bandmates and
yeah, exactly. I feel pretty gifted because, well, one, that's my profession, as being a recording and mixing engineer, so I had the means to basically demo my vocals and make them usable for the album, as opposed to, like, like most times when you do demo recordings, they're usually kind of they're not professionally done, so you
like
can't
a
really
scratch
use them
track or something.
and exactly, scratch tracks. So you can't really use them in the grand scheme of the full record, just due to sonic quality.
Right.
But I mean, at the same time, when it comes to death metal, sometimes grimier is better.
Yeah.
But not for this album.
Yeah.
So I feel gifted in a lot of ways that I was able to basically spend all this time experimenting and recording, and basically all of it was usable as far as the final product was concerned.
Nice.
There wasn't really much throwaway stuff. It was just a matter of, you know, what works best.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, creating music with your bandmates and recording is I haven't played in a while, but I had a band I was in for about a decade, and we did a few records, and that was always my favorite, was like you said, putting the puzzle pieces together and, like,
it's always great when it finally clicks too, you know, because it's a fun process to put it together, but then once it clicks and you can all finally, like, listen to your music, like, to listen to your music and not play it.
Yeah.
It's a very surreal experience.
Yeah.
That I feel like a lot of people don't. I mean, musicians obviously understand, but like, it's also different from other forms of art, I feel like, because, I mean, you know, a painter or a sculptor can, like, look at their work of art after the fact and, like, admire what they did, but no forms of art to me are as dynamic as music.
Right.
Because, well, one, like, music it's almost like a different experience every time.
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of depending how you absorb it, how you take it in, you know. It comes in all different kinds of settings.
Right. And you know, there's a lot of bands that you know, when they tour, they might have a new song that they wrote a week before the first date, and by the end of the tour, it's a completely different song, because they played it 36 times, and the 28th time they were, switched.
Oh yeah, totally.
Something.
And that's the beautiful thing about it.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's one of those things where it's like, a lot of, there's virtue to be had in a band. You go to see a band and you're like, oh, they sound just like the album.
Right.
Like, sometimes that's awesome, but like sometimes it's like, but like, I paid however much money for this ticket and I just like heard the album I have at home,
right. Yeah.
just louder.
Right, right. Yep.
Which, in certain cases is great, but in other cases, you almost want to hear a new interpretation of the music.
Yeah.
Be it just, a different solo, a different like, a different vamp on a part or something like that, And being a recording engineer, I worked with a lot of jazz musicians.
Yeah.
And it was, I kind of came to love that aspect of jazz, whereas, one song is never the same.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
They'll play a tune 5 times and it's totally different.
Yeah.
It's the same song at its core, but it's different every single time.
I know.
There's something beautiful about that I never really learned to appreciate before working with jazz musicians.
Yeah, actually seeing it done in front of you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. As opposed to classical where it's, on a paper.
Yeah.
You play what's on the paper.
Right.
That's classical.
Yeah.
And death metal, and just to kind of go back to the death metal aspect of things, I equate death metal a lot of the time to classical music.
Yeah.
Because I listen to a lot of classical music growing up, and I still do.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people agree that death metal shares a lot of different traits with classical music. Beethoven was pretty friggin' death metal at times.
Yeah.
It's just always, I don't know. Music to me is just always, it's such a dynamic art form. I don't see how anybody could ever get bored with it.
Yeah. And you, so like you were saying, so your job is actually you work in a recording studio.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was. I work from home nowadays. These days I'm just mixing and mastering.
Yeah.
More so than being in the studio with people, but
right.
I do miss that aspect, and I hope that once the world kind of returns to normal, I'm kind of able to get back out there a little bit more.
Yeah. 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 And speaking of that, you were on tour with Origin and. Mm-hmm. Who was it? Was in one other band?
Beneath the Massacre.
Beneath the Massacre. And, how many shows did you guys play before you had to stop?
I want to say we got 4 shows in, 4 or 5.
Yeah.
I could give you an exact number. I can pull up the tour flyer because the whole thing was almost like a traumatic experience.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, because
yeah.
it just turned into so quickly. It turned into an absolute clusterfuck.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm looking at the tour flyer. We got 4 shows in before it got tanked.
Yeah. Damn.
Yeah. So we ended in Detroit. So the Midwest kind of got a taste of that tour, and then the rest just went to shit, which is sad because just after those few shows in the Midwest and just how reception was, how well we were doing with merchandise.
Yeah.
We knew, we were like, oh man, this is going to be a great tour. And then no.
Yeah.
But hey.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
The whole music industry has been, uprooted. That and people don't realize.
Oh yeah.
People that work on tours that guitar techs and stuff like that are all out of work and.
Oh yeah, their livelihood's gone. So as far as the music industry goes, it already was this like ever-changing, ever-morphing, like dynamic machine that just could never get its act together.
Right.
Under normal circumstances.
Yeah.
And then you throw the pandemic into the
Right.
mix and it just immediately the gears just jammed.
Yeah.
Because, the only money to be made as a musician these days is touring.
Yeah.
Really.
Merch,
you don't make money from records anymore.
Yeah.
You don't make money. You only make money from merchandise and guarantees, basically.
Right. Yeah.
Or if you hoard all of the rider food and stuff that you get and sell
Yeah,
it,
so you don't have to eat. Yeah. Or you don't have to spend money on it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. but yeah, so basically, yeah, the income for the musicians kind of just ended. Like, there's not really many other ways to make money as a musician.
Yeah. And
sadly.
So you guys had a lot of forward momentum, with a new record out, and have you guys been able to maintain that? I mean, the record it came out in September. Is that when it came out?
July, actually.
Okay.
End of July.
End of July. Okay. So in the summer.
And yeah, so it's been really tough on us because this had been it had been anticipated for so long that, we were going to put this album out, and traditionally Defeated always goes on tour. They play, and we would play the whole album top to bottom. That's just the way they've always done it.
Yeah.
And that's how we were going to do it. Coming up this summer, we were planning to be on tour when the album dropped. Like, we were going to be on like our second or third show, I believe, when the album came out, or I can't remember exactly, but it was around that time. And we had it just pains me because we had such a good tour plan.
Yeah.
And it's pointless to say what it was because it's not happening.
Yeah.
But there's always a chance that it could happen again. So I don't want to spill the beans on what the tour was.
Yeah.
But it was going to be so good too, and it bummed us all out so hard.
Right.
Because we were all kind of optimistic at the time. Like, we were just trying to be like, maybe by the summer, Trump says it might be gone when the hot weather comes. Maybe this guy's on to something.
Yeah, or the day after the election. It's going to disappear.
But it just very quickly, as time moved on, we were like, this isn't going to be resolved by the summer. There's no way we're touring this year. And we didn't want to be, and we've had this discussion a bunch of times that, we were basically, at the time, we were probably one of the last bands who were on the road. Like, we were talking to a lot of other bands. I had talked to Travis from, I was talking to Travis from Cattle Decapitation.
Yeah.
I was talking to my friend Obi from Pathology.
Yeah.
And all those guys were on tour, or actually Travis wasn't on tour. They had a tour planned and it got canceled. But Obi, Pathology, they were on tour at the time, and me and him were talking like every day, like, oh, do you got any more show cancellations?
Right.
And I say every day as if this was like a week-long thing. It was only like 4 days.
Right.
But every day I would talk to him, and he'd be like, yeah, we got this show got canceled. We're thinking about just calling it today.
Yeah.
And we're like, yeah, we're kind of the same, but we're still going on. And, day by day, it just got more and more dismal. Like, literally the first show, the fourth show was our last show. The first show, everything was like kind of okay. We were like, okay, we might have a tour.
Right.
Second show, very dismal. The third show, I think the third show was Chicago.
Yeah.
Yeah, the third show was Chicago. That was Beneath the Massacre's last show. They were like, okay, whether the tour goes on, we have to go back to Canada, or we might not be able to go back.
Right.
So Beneath the Massacre left after show 3, and then just us and Origin played the fourth show in Detroit, and the rest of the tour was canceled.
Yeah. And this is...
And up to that point, a bunch of shows had been dropping, like, all along the tour, and we were, like, closely monitoring. We were like, can we still make this work? Like,
right.
Yeah, we'll have 2 days off here, we'll have 2 days off here, but, we still have a tour trajectory that can potentially happen if shit doesn't hit the fan,
Yeah.
But shit very much hit the fan.
Yeah. And that was was it right in March when that was?
That was right in March, yeah.
Yeah.
The last show was March 15th.
Okay. Yeah,
so right when this shit hit the fan, really.
That's nuts. Yeah, the last show I saw was Today Is the Day, played in Providence right at the end of end of February, like the 28th. And
basically right around that time. That's when the looming darkness was the dark cloud was moving.
Yeah, I know it's
over the planet.
Yeah.
But that was a clusterfuck at the time because, we kind of anticipated, this pandemic might get bad, it might affect the tour. You might end up having to call off the tour. But we were kind of just operating under the assumption that, we're going to do this tour.
Yeah.
So we basically get to the fourth show and the show gets canceled, and we're like, okay, what the fuck do we do now? We're in Detroit.
Yeah.
So we talked to a buddy of ours named Kyle. He's an old drummer at Gorgasm.
Okay.
And he put us up at his place for a few days while we kind of figured out travel situations. We all had to get new flights. All of our other flights were a month away, so
Right.
we had to tank those and we had to get Louis back to Berlin, which
Right.
was it was hard to find him a flight.
Right.
We'd find a flight, and then like an hour later, that flight was canceled.
Right, of course.
So we'd have to find. It was just a really painstaking process.
Yeah.
And the other problem we had was we were only 4 shows in, and we had boxes of merchandise
Yeah.
we were stacked for basically the half of the tour.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of merchandise.
Yeah.
So we basically just took to Facebook land, and we're like, hey, help us out. Like, if you want the tour that never was merch
Yeah. Yeah.
with tour dates that never happened, like, this is your chance. Like,
Yeah.
just take all this stuff.
Yeah.
So we got like hundreds and hundreds of orders.
Oh,
we
good.
made
Good.
it was great. I mean, it was so uplifting after all this garbage happened,
Yeah. I think that's one positive thing that's come out of this is, artists have become closer with their fans, and they're doing
definitely.
interesting stuff
The divide definitely became less. Everybody came down to a level of humanity, I guess you can say, as far as the fan musician dynamic. But yeah, that was really great for us because, one, it allowed us to recoup a lot of the costs that we had basically lost from, sinking money into the tour via flights and all this other stuff, the van rental, printing merchandise, of course.
Yeah.
So we were able to actually almost break even after all the merch sales.
That's good.
But it was just really funny because we were in this really small town in Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember where exactly we were. Not Lafayette, but not far from there. Maybe we were in Lafayette, but and we were showing up with these big boxes of hundreds,
shirts,
maybe 100 packages at one time in this tiny little post office that probably sees 8 packages a day.
Right.
And the workers at the post office were just not prepared to handle this kind of influx of mail.
That's awesome.
So we basically we just exhausted the U.S. Postal Service of this entire region of Indiana.
Nice.
It was pretty funny. I mean, it was definitely kind of amusing.
Yeah. And I keep thinking about the future of, if they say even a year from now, they say, okay, it's okay for bands to tour. It's going to be kind of a shit show because when you think of the hundreds and hundreds and thousands of bands that are going to want to get back on the road, there's only so many venues and cities.
Well, we already kind of decided because I mean we were already the guinea pigs.
Right.
We basically left for a tour when we weren't sure it was even going to happen.
Yeah.
And basically it was maybe this tour will happen, maybe we'll get sent home, or maybe we'll all die. So we were the guinea pigs.
Yeah, nobody knew.
Run, exactly. So, but we had the tour tank on us, and we kind of had to, deal with what was deal the hand that was dealt.
Yeah.
So we've kind of decided we're not going to be one of those first bands to be okay, touring is kind of okay.
Right.
So let's just go for it and just kind of see what happens. We want to see other bands successfully complete a tour before we do it again.
Yeah.
Because we just don't want to put ourselves in that predicament again to put us in a deficit financially, because I mean, we're an underground band. We're not, like Kiss, we can't afford to just tank a tour.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be devastating for all of us on an individual basis,
Yeah. Your bandmates
because all of us took time off work at that point, so we had already lost 2 weeks of work because due to all the prep and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because before the tour even started, we were gone for probably 5 days.
Yeah.
We had met up maybe 4 or 5 days before to do rehearsals, pick up all the merch, pick up the van, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we had all kind of sacrificed a bit of work and stuff like that to get on tour in the first place. So we were already starting out at a deficit,
right,
on an individual basis.
Yeah, yeah. But that's just what you do when you want to, just do
exactly.
this
Usually it doesn't go to shit that badly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's usually not a pandemic during the tour, but
yeah, usually, yeah.
it's a rare thing.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. I appreciate you coming on and doing this. I've was doing these for a while, and I haven't done one since July. So you're the first one I've done.
Oh, great!
Since then, so I've been
kind
of getting
the
back
reignition.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so the future of the band is just you guys are out there, and when it's okay.
Yeah, we exist. We're still here. Yeah. The album's out, and we've been getting really positive feedback, and we did like a small little music video for one of the songs, Imposed Corporeal Inhabitation. We did a small little like DIY, filmed in our living rooms, music video for it that did well.
Yeah. And what's the name of the record for the listener?
The Sanguinary Impetus.
And if someone wants to buy it, where you guys will get the most money out of that, where can they do that?
You can buy it directly from us via, we have a big cartel store. We also have Bandcamp.
Okay.
Both of those are direct to band profits.
Yeah.
We have a bunch of merchandise for sale. I have a big tub I still have actually leftover tour shirts and stuff.
Yeah.
It's just funny because it's just you just look at the tour dates and I just get sad because I was so stoked for the tour too.
Yeah, when you see
I'm also a huge Beneath the Massacre fan. I've always loved those dudes, and I was so stoked to be on tour with them.
Yeah, and
they were such cool guys. I was just like, I get to watch Beneath the Massacre after our set every day. I was like, this is awesome. And, after 3 days, no more.
Damn. Yeah. Well, hopefully we will see you guys do something again.
Oh yeah, I mean we'll be back on the trail once we're able to do so.
Awesome. All right, man. Well, thanks again for doing this, Josh. And
of course, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I will talk to you soon.
Absolutely.
All right. Take care.
Cheers, bud.
Bye.